Both the Border Patrol Union and immigration activists are expressing frustration at the pace of the investigation into agents photographed confronting migrants in Del Rio, Texas. Those images show agents on horseback pursuing migrants who had traveled from Mexico to makeshift camps in the U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas vowed to address the incident quickly, but more than 6 weeks later, the investigation is still ongoing. For more, let's bring in CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Hi there, Camilo. So do we know why the investigation into these agents' conduct is taking so long?
Hi, Elaine. I think it's important to just set the scene here. Back in September, we saw this massive outcry over images and videos that surfaced online that depicted mounted Border Patrol agents aggressively dispersing migrants, many of them Haitians, and in Del Rio, Texas. The Department of Homeland Security promised that there would be a swift investigation into these images. Even President Biden came out during a press conference to say that the Border Patrol agents who are being accused of wrongdoing would quote-unquote pay. But since then, it's been a few weeks have transpired. There has been really no updates. We know, thanks to reporting by our colleague Nicole Scanga, that the Border Patrol agents at the center of the investigation are now being interviewed by investigators at the Department of Homeland Security. But beyond that, Elaine, there hasn't been any update, and that is frustrating both the union that is representing these Border Patrol agents, but also immigrant advocates who are calling for more accountability.
Well, we'll continue to track that, certainly, but thousands of migrants who were at the temporary camp in Del Rio were asylum seekers from Haiti. How many Haitians has the administration deported since September, and what is the current situation at the southern border?
So since September 19th, when we saw this sharp increase in the arrival of Haitian migrants in Del Rio, Texas, the U.S. government, Elaine, has expelled 8,500 Haitian migrants to Haiti on 80 deportation flights. This is a massive deportation operation, and it is in response again to the sudden increase in the number of Haitian asylum seekers and migrants coming to the U.S.-Mexico border. We know that about 44% of the deportees are women and children, and the Biden administration, has used a Trump administration policy known as Title 42 to carry out these expulsions. This is a public health law that allows the U.S. government to expel migrants without allowing them to see an immigration judge or an asylum officer. And given the scale and the speed of these mass deportations, they could very well be part, Elaine, of one of the largest and swiftest air deportation campaigns in U.S. history.
That was going to be my question. Is there any precedence for deporting that many people so quickly?
So we've seen both the Trump administration and the Biden administration use this Title 42 public health authority to expel hundreds of thousands of migrants and asylum seekers by land to Mexico and to Canada. But in terms of an air expulsion operation, this is pretty unprecedented, certainly in modern history.
Well, the U.S. is planning to send deportation case notices to 78,000 migrants who were not fully processed after crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. Camilo, can you tell us more about that operation?
Sure. So typically when migrants are not rapidly deported from the country, they are released with what is called a notice to appear in immigration court. And they are placed in deportation proceedings where an immigration judge will determine whether these migrants will be allowed to stay in the country or whether they will have to be deported to their native home country. However, beginning in March of this year, Border Patrol officials started to place tens of thousands of migrants, especially migrant families, and in these proceedings that are called notices to report. And these, unlike notices to appear, these notices to report don't place migrants on formal deportation proceedings. They are merely instructions for the migrants to show up to a local ICE office to undergo further processing. And the reason that Border Patrol agents conducted these notices to report Elaine was because of the overwhelming number of migrants coming to the U.S.-Mexico border. A notice to appear usually takes about an hour or more to complete, but a notice to report can take as little as 10 minutes to process. So this is why the Biden administration is now sending these migrants who were not fully processed for deportation these deportation case notices, and it is now placing them in formal deportation proceedings. They will have a chance, obviously, to seek asylum, but if a judge orders their removal, either because they miss court or because they lose their case, they are subject to deportation.
All right, and finally, Camilo, what is the latest on the tens of thousands of Afghan evacuees seeking resettlement in the U.S.?
So since August, the U.S. has admitted about 70,000 Afghan evacuees who were evacuated from Afghanistan following the Taliban takeover of the country. Many of them are Afghans who assisted the U.S. military, some are family members of U.S. citizens and green card holders, and others are Afghans who the U.S. government determined could face harm in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, such as aid workers and journalists. We know that 50,000 of these Afghan evacuees are currently living at 8 domestic military sites, Elaine, where they're undergoing vaccination against the coronavirus and other communicable diseases and further immigration paperwork. We know that the pace of transfers from these military sites has picked up in the past few weeks. 14,000 evacuees have now been resettled in U.S. communities through the help of nonprofit resettlement agencies, but the Biden administration announced this new unprecedented program last month that will allow groups of private U.S. citizens to sponsor Afghan evacuees, so we could see private individuals who raise enough funds be able to sponsor these families and help them integrate into American society, Elaine.
It'll be really interesting to see how that all works and plays out. Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Camilo, thank you very much.
Thanks, Elaine.